Hey, my name is Mason Cole. I'm 27 years old and I've been swinging a hammer for almost 6 years now. I work for a small crew that does residential remodels and repairs around Austin. Nothing glamorous. We tear out old drywall, frame additions, hang doors that never quite fit the first time, and spend entire days on roofs under a Texas sun that feels like it's personally offended by your existence. At the end of most shifts, my back aches in that low, steady way that lets you know you actually did something. I don't mind it. There's something honest about building things that stay standing after you leave. I live in a three-story apartment building on the east side that was probably nice sometime in the 80s. Now the stairs creak like they're complaining, the parking lot is more pothole than asphalt, and the washing machines in the basement work about half the time. My truck is a 2009 Ford F-150 with faded blue paint, a passenger door that only latches if you slam it hard enough, and an air conditioner that decides on its own whether today is a good day to function. It's not pretty, but it's never left me stranded. That counts for a lot. The apartment next to mine belongs to Clara Bennett. She moved in 8 months ago. 31, works as a client manager for a small interior design firm downtown. I know because one Saturday she asked if I could help carry a bookshelf up to the second floor. It was heavier than it looked. After we got it inside, she handed me a cold bottle of water like I just saved her life. We started talking after that. Not dating, not flirting, just easy. The kind of easy that happens when two people live 10 feet apart and both have lives that are a little too quiet. I fix her leaky faucet. She leaves leftover lasagna on my doorstep when she cooks too much. I replace the bulb in her porch light. She signs for my packages when I'm gone all day. Sometimes we sit on the metal stairs between our doors and talk for 10 or 15 minutes about nothing important. It's comfortable, safe. Neither of us has tried to make it more than that until last Friday. I got home late, covered in sawdust and dried sweat, the back of my neck still burning from the sun. All I wanted was a shower and 8 hours of sleep. I pulled the old truck into my usual spot, killed the engine, and that's when I saw her. Clara was standing under the overhang near the front entrance, wearing a deep blue dress that hit just above her knees. Her hair was down, soft brown waves brushing her shoulders. She had on heels, actual heels, and a small purse tucked against her side. I had never seen her dressed like that. Normally it was jeans and oversized sweaters or simple work clothes. She looked beautiful, and she also looked like she wanted to throw her phone into the street. I rolled down the window. "You okay?" She glanced up, exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. "Uber canceled. My date starts in 20 minutes. And these shoes were clearly designed by someone who hates women." I looked at the heels, then at the empty passenger seat beside me. "I'll take you," Clara blinked. "Mason, you don't have to." "I know. But if you walk, you're gonna show up with 2 feet that want a divorce from the rest of your body." A small laugh escaped her. She still hesitated. "You just got off work. Truck's still running. I'm still awake. Get in." She studied me for a second like she was checking whether this was pity or something else. It wasn't pity. I just didn't like seeing her standing there alone, all dressed up for something she suddenly wasn't sure she wanted to do. Finally, she opened the passenger door. It took 2 tries before it latched with that familiar metallic clunk. "You learn fast," I said. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm in no mood to be impressed by basic mechanical competence right now. We drove in silence for the first couple of blocks. The radio was stuck on a station that only came in fuzzy, so I left it off. Clara stared out the window, one hand resting on her purse. "His name is Graham," she said eventually. "Finance guy. His profile said he likes hiking, red wine, and deep conversations. Sounds like someone the algorithm really wants to succeed." She laughed for real that time. It was a good sound, made the inside of the truck feel a little less tired. When I pulled up in front of the bar downtown, she didn't move to get out right away. The place had warm yellow lights spilling onto the sidewalk and the low hum of people laughing inside. Clara looked at the door like it was a test she wasn't sure she wanted to take. "You don't have to go in," I said quietly. "I know." She turned to me. "But I already said yes, and I spent 45 minutes on this dress. If it sucks, text me. I'll come get you." Clara looked at me for a long moment. "You'd actually do that? I drove you here in the most judgmental truck in Austin. You think I'm gonna ghost you now?" That earned me a small, genuine smile. She reached for the door handle. Thanks, Mason. Try to have fun. She nodded, stepped out, and closed the door. I watched her walk inside, shoulders straight, head high, then sat there with the engine idling for longer than I needed to. Eventually, I shook my head at myself. Don't be stupid. She's on a date with someone else. I drove home, made instant noodles, and turned on the TV without really watching it. Around 9:47, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Clara. You still awake? I sat up straighter. Me? Yeah, everything okay? Three dots appeared, disappeared, then came back. Clara. Date ended early. Can you come get me? I was already reaching for my keys before I finished reading the message. I found her half a block down from the bar, standing under a flickering streetlight with her heels dangling from one hand. Her hair had loosened from the wind, a few strands stuck to her cheek. She looked smaller somehow without the shoes. Bare feet on the warm sidewalk, dress swaying just above her knees. Not sad exactly, just tired in a way that went deeper than the hour. She opened the passenger door and climbed in. This time the door latched on the first slam. You're getting good at that, I said. Clara dropped the heels on the floorboard and let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in her chest all evening. I'm currently in no state to accept compliments about my door slamming skills. I didn't push. I just pulled away from the curb and let the truck rumble through the quiet side streets toward home. The radio was still dead, so the only sound was the low growl of the engine and the occasional hiss of tires over still wet pavement from an earlier rain. After a few blocks she spoke, voice quiet but steady. It was fine. I glanced over. Fine like actually good, or fine like I'm politely warning the fire department? Fine like there was nothing wrong, which somehow made it worse. She told me about Graham. Polite, well-dressed, asked all the right questions about her job, her favorite travel spots, what she liked to do on weekends, ordered wine without making a show of it, laughed at the appropriate moments, never once made her feel uncomfortable or small. And yet the entire night, she'd felt like she was sitting across from a very charming job interviewer. He asked what I wanted in 5 years, Clara said, staring out the window. And I swear I almost answered with bullet points, like I was pitching myself for a position. I couldn't help the short laugh that escaped. She smiled too, but it faded fast. I kept waiting for something real to happen, a spark, a moment where I thought, oh, there you are. But it never came. It was just two people performing, being on a date. We drove in silence for another minute. The truck's old heater hummed faintly even though the night was warm. Clara shifted in her seat, tucking one bare foot under the other. I'm tired, Mason, she said, almost to herself. Tired of meeting strangers and pretending I'm someone they might want to keep. Tired of making myself smaller so I fit whatever version they're looking for. I kept my eyes on the road, but my hands tightened slightly on the wheel. When I pulled into the apartment parking lot, she still didn't reach for the door. She just sat there looking down at her bare feet resting on the faded floor mat, the same mat that had seen years of construction boots and coffee spills. Then, very softly, she asked, have you ever been on a date and realized halfway through that the only person you actually wanted to talk to that night was the one who drove you there? The question landed like a stone in still water. I felt it ripple straight through my chest. Clara didn't look at me. She kept her gaze on her feet, like the answer might be written somewhere on the old carpet. I didn't speak right away. Anything I said too fast would either ruin whatever this was or make it too real before either of us was ready. So I stayed quiet, letting the truck idle, letting the moment breathe. After a long stretch of silence, she opened the door. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the faint smell of wet asphalt and someone's distant barbecue. Clara stepped out barefoot, heels still in her hand, dress brushing against her legs. She paused with one hand on the open door and turned back. Her voice was barely louder than the idling engine. Next time, could it just be you? She didn't wait for an answer. She closed the door gently this time, turned, and walked up the metal stairs without looking back. I heard the soft click of her apartment door a few seconds later. I sat there for almost 10 full minutes, hands still on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. The radio crackled once with a burst of static, then went dead again. My heart was beating harder than it had any right to after a 10-minute drive. I could have said yes. I could have said I'd been thinking the same thing since the moment she got in the truck wearing that blue dress. I could have said I didn't want to be the guy who dropped her off at someone else's date anymore, but I didn't say any of it. Instead, I drove the 100 feet to my own parking spot, killed the engine, and went inside. I lay on top of the sheets fully dressed, staring at the ceiling while the ceiling fan turned slow circles above me. She was probably just exhausted. The date had been disappointing. She'd had a moment of vulnerability and said something she might regret in the morning. I was her neighbor, the guy with the reliable truck and the habit of fixing things. That was all. I repeated those thoughts until they almost sounded true. Almost. Around 3 in the morning, I finally drifted off, still wearing my work clothes from the day before. Sunday morning came too bright and too early. My phone buzzed on the nightstand at 8:42. Clara. Farmer's market opens at 9. I'm thinking of going. If you want to come, I'll be downstairs in 20 minutes. No pressure. I was dressed and brushing my teeth before I finished reading. At 8:58, I was waiting at the bottom of the stairs when her door opened. She stepped out in a light denim jacket over a simple white tee, jeans, and sneakers. Hair pulled back in a low ponytail. No makeup, no performance, just Clara. She saw me and the corner of her mouth lifted. You got here fast. I live close. Living next door doesn't count as a reason. Then I'm hungry. She laughed, soft and real, and we walked to the truck together. The farmer's market was already busy when we arrived. Rows of white tents, the smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee and cut herbs hanging in the air. We wandered without a list, tasting honey from a wooden dipper, tearing pieces of still warm sourdough, buying a small basket of peaches neither of us really needed. Clara admitted she would probably forget about the bunch of cilantro she grabbed until it turned sad and limp in her fridge. I bumped her shoulder lightly. I should start calling that the bouquet of hope. She smirked. Then you better prepare yourself for pasta that tastes like disappointment. We ended up at a tiny breakfast stand at the far end of the market, the only two seats left side by side at the narrow counter. Our knees touched under the wooden plank and neither of us moved away. The coffee was strong and a little bitter. The eggs were perfect. After a while, Clara set her cup down and looked straight ahead at the row of tents. I've been thinking about what I said last night. I waited. I meant it, she continued quietly. But I also don't want to make everything weird if you don't feel the same. You're my neighbor. One of the few people who actually makes this building feel less lonely. I don't want to lose that because I said something after a bad date. I turned slightly on the stool so I could see her face. Clara, I drove halfway across town at almost 10 o'clock on a Friday night because you sent 4 words. I didn't do that just because you're the girl next door. She finally looked at me. Something in her shoulders loosened, like she'd been holding tension since the moment she whispered those words last night. Okay, she said, almost a whisper. Then, okay. I reached over and gently brushed a loose strand of hair away from her cheek. She didn't pull back. Her skin was warm from the morning sun. For a second, we just stayed like that. Her eyes on mine, my fingers barely touching her face. The noise of the market fading into something distant and unimportant. It wasn't a kiss, but it felt bigger than one. 3 days later, I sent the text. There's a new taco spot near Congress. 7 o'clock? This time, I'm not just the driver. Her reply came back in under a minute, bringing an empty stomach and zero filter. You've been warned. I took longer in the shower than I had in months. Scrubbed the last traces of drywall dust from under my fingernails, used the good soap Clara's company had given me as a Christmas gift last year, and stood under the hot water trying to remember the last time I'd actually looked forward to an evening instead of just enduring it. I put on the only button-down shirt I owned that didn't have a permanent stain, then spent 10 minutes cleaning out the passenger seat of the truck. Empty water bottles, old receipts, a roll of blue painter's tape that had somehow migrated from the job site. When I was done, the floor mat still looked tired, but at least it didn't look like a construction site had exploded inside it. Clara came down the stairs at 6:52 wearing a terracotta-colored top that made her skin glow under the porch light, dark jeans and her hair loose around her shoulders. No heels this time, just simple white sneakers. She looked like someone I could spend hours talking to without ever checking the clock. She stopped at the bottom step and raised an eyebrow at the truck. The passenger seat is suspiciously clean. I was going for the illusion of being an organized person. Cute. The truck or me? She opened the door and slid in. It slammed shut on the first try. I'll decide after dinner. The taco place was small and loud in the best way. Brick walls, mismatched wooden tables, a chalkboard menu that changed every week, and the smell of grilled meat and cilantro hanging thick in the air. We got the last two seats by the front window. Warm yellow light from the string bulbs overhead caught in Clara's hair every time she leaned forward. This wasn't two neighbors grabbing food anymore. We both knew it. The air between us felt charged in a way that made ordinary conversation feel like it mattered. She told me about the first apartment she'd rented in Austin, a tiny place above a barbecue joint on the east side. Every morning she woke up smelling like smoked brisket, whether she wanted to or not. I gained 5 pounds in 2 months just from breathing, she said, laughing. Eventually I had to move or buy bigger jeans. I told her about my first real job on a crew, the time I measured a door rough opening wrong by half an inch, and the foreman made me rip the entire frame out and start over in front of everyone. Humbling, I admitted. Also the fastest I ever learned to double-check my tape measure. Clara tilted her head, studying me. Do you like what you do? I thought about it for a second, turning my empty beer bottle slowly between my palms. I like the part where something that wasn't there before suddenly is. At the end of a long day, you can point at a wall or a roof or a set of cabinets and say, I helped make that. Most jobs don't give you that. But, I shrugged, but sometimes the work is loud enough that I don't have to think about anything else, and I think I've gotten a little too good at using it that way. Clara didn't rush to fill the silence. She just nodded like she understood exactly what I meant, and that was somehow more intimate than if she'd tried to fix it. After we finished eating, we didn't head straight back to the truck. Instead, I drove us down to the river and parked under a row of old live oaks. The night was warm, the water dark and slow-moving, city lights flickering on the far bank. We walked along the gravel path without any real destination, just to keep the evening from ending too soon. Clara told me about Evan, the almost fiancé from 2 years ago. On paper, he was perfect. Stable job, good family, never raised his voice. They'd been together 18 months and everyone kept telling her how lucky she was. I stayed 6 months longer than I should have, she said quietly, because I was scared of being the one who gave up. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I just became the version of myself he seemed to want, it would finally feel right. I looked over at her. The breeze off the water lifted a few strands of her hair. Leaving something that isn't real isn't giving up, I said. She smiled, small and a little sad. You say that like it's easy. Because I've never had to do it. We stopped near a low stone wall overlooking the water. Clara turned to face me, arms crossed loosely over her chest. What about you? She asked. Why are you still single? I almost made a joke. She saw it coming and shook her head. Real answer, no dodging. I leaned back against the wall and told her about the relationship I'd had at 24. No big betrayal, no dramatic ending. We just slowly stopped choosing each other, and I let it happen because letting go felt safer than fighting to keep something that was already slipping away. After that, I got good at keeping people at arm's length, close enough that I wasn't lonely, far enough that if they left, I could still say I was fine. Clara listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. That sounds exhausting, she finally said. It is, but you get used to it. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of her shampoo, something clean and citrusy. Maybe you don't have to stay used to it. The words settled between us like an invitation. I didn't plan the kiss. I didn't lean in with any grand intention. I just looked at her standing there in the soft river light, eyes steady on mine, and something in my chest gave way. I reached up slowly, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. My mouth found hers in a kiss that was unhurried and certain. No rush, no performance. Just the quiet acknowledgement of everything that had been building since the night I drove her to a date with someone else. Her hand came up to rest lightly against my chest, right over the spot where my heart was beating too hard for how gentle the moment was. When we parted, she kept her forehead against mine for a second. breathing the same air. I don't want another relationship that's just fine, she whispered. Me neither. I drove her home with the windows down, the night air warm against our skin. At the bottom of the stairs, she turned to face me instead of heading up right away. I meant what I said the other night, she told me, about only wanting it to be you. I nodded. I know. She looked at me for a long moment, something unspoken in her eyes. Not a question exactly, more like a quiet challenge. Do you have the courage to stay? Then she smiled, soft and a little shy, and walked up the stairs. Before she disappeared through her door, she glanced back one last time. For the first time in years, I wanted the answer to be yes. 11 days after the kiss by the river, everything got tested. I was on a job site in South Austin when my crew leader waved me over to the temporary office trailer. He dropped a thick folder on the folding table between us. Mason, the company landed a big one up in Denver. 6 months minimum, maybe a year. They need a lead on framing and finish work. I put your name in. I stared at the folder like it might bite me. Higher pay. Supervisor title, housing stipend. The kind of step a guy like me usually has to wait years for. If this offer had landed a month earlier, I would have said yes before he finished talking. Pack the truck, close the apartment, start over somewhere new. That was the pattern I knew. Keep moving. Keep things temporary. Don't let anything get deep enough to hurt when it ends. But now, every time I pictured Denver, all I saw was the creaky metal stairs outside my building, Clara's little row of plants by her door, the passenger seat of my truck where she liked to sit barefoot with her knees pulled up, the slow kiss by the river, and the way she'd looked at me that night like she was asking whether I had the guts to stay. I took the folder home and sat in the truck for almost an hour after dark, engine off, just staring at the light in her living room window. I wanted to tell her. I also knew I needed to figure out my own answer first. The next morning, she knocked on my door with 2 cups of coffee, and one look at my face told her something was wrong. Someone finally figure out you've been using the company's tape measure as a doorstop? I took the coffee. I need to talk to you. We sat on the top step between our apartments. I told her about Denver. She listened the way she always did. Quiet, patient, no interruptions. When I finished, she didn't look hurt or angry. She just asked the one question I was hoping she wouldn't. What do you want? I gave the easy answer first. It's a good opportunity. Clara shook her head. I asked what you want, not what looks good on paper. I stared down at the coffee cup in my hands. The lid was still on, steam fogging the little sip hole. I don't want to go. She waited. But I'm scared that if I stay because of you, one day you'll look at me and think you were the reason I gave up something big. Clara set her cup down on the step between us. I don't want you to stay because you're afraid of losing me, she said. And I don't want you to go because you're afraid of needing me. The words hit harder than the job offer ever could. That Thursday night, I drove out to an old job site we'd finished the week before. The new house stood framed and silent under the security lights. I sat on the tailgate of the truck with a cold beer and looked at the bare studs and the roof trusses catching the moonlight. I'd always told myself I liked building things that lasted. Walls that stayed straight, roofs that didn't leak. But when it came to my own life, I'd only ever built temporary. Temporary apartments, temporary jobs, temporary connections. I called it freedom. Really, it was just fear wearing a work belt. The next morning, I met my crew leader in the trailer before the rest of the guys arrived. I'm turning it down. He studied me for a long second. You sure? This kind of shot doesn't come around often. I'm sure. Because of a girl? I smiled, small and honest. Partly. But mostly because I finally figured out that not every opportunity that's farther away is actually better. He nodded once, like he'd been waiting for me to say something like that for years. First time you've sounded like a grown man, Cole. That afternoon, I pulled into the apartment parking lot and saw Clara outside, crouched down trying to gather up a torn grocery bag. Cilantro and green onions were scattered across the asphalt like green confetti. I parked and walked over. Another bouquet of hope? She looked up, half laughing, half annoyed. Shut up. It has a life of its own. I helped her pick up the herbs, then stood and set it straight. I turned down Denver. Clara went still, the plastic bag dangling from one hand. Mason. Not because you asked me to stay, I turned it down because I want to. Because I want to try building something that isn't made out of wood and nails and concrete for once. She looked at me for a long time, eyes shining in the late afternoon light. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me right there in the middle of the parking lot, grocery bag and all. I felt her breathe out against my shoulder like she'd been holding it since the day I told her about the offer. For the first time in my life, I didn't care who saw. I didn't feel the old instinct to keep one foot near the exit. I just held her back and let the moment be exactly what it was, real and worth staying for. Our relationship didn't explode into anything dramatic. It grew the way good houses do, slow, steady, one careful layer at a time. Clara started leaving a jacket on the back of my kitchen chair. I claimed a drawer in her dresser for the clean shirts I kept forgetting to take home. Friday nights became our unspoken routine. She cooked. I washed the dishes because she hated doing them. And we argued over what to watch while the water ran. I fixed the wobbly shelf where she kept her plants. She labeled every single one of my toolboxes with a label maker because, in her words, you live like a metal tornado and I'm tired of digging for screws. The old truck became part of us. It carried Clara to the farmer's market on Sunday mornings, to the taco place on Congress, down to the river on warm nights, and once all the way to her friend's wedding in Dripping Springs, where she wore heels for exactly 2 hours before kicking them off under the table and walking barefoot to the truck afterward. Every time she slammed the passenger door with that familiar metallic clunk, she'd grin and say, "Your truck and I have our own relationship now." "I'm jealous," I'd answer, and she'd laugh like she knew I wasn't entirely joking. Late one night at the end of summer, we sat on the tailgate of the truck in an empty lot near a new job site I was starting the following week. The city lights glowed in the distance. The air still held the day's heat, thick with the smell of dust and cut grass. Clara leaned her shoulder against mine, bare feet swinging above the gravel. "I'm glad that Uber canceled," she said quietly. I looked over at her. The glow from the distant streetlights caught the curve of her smile. "That's the only five-star review I've ever given a broken app." She laughed, then reached into the pocket of her jacket and pulled something out. A single key on a simple ring. Not her apartment key. Mine. I stared at it. "Where did you get that?" "You keep a spare in that metal box under your bathroom sink. Extremely secure, by the way." "You're admitting to stealing my truck key?" "No," she said, turning the key slowly between her fingers. "I'm proposing a long-term partnership with this emotionally complicated vehicle." I took the key from her. The metal was still warm from her pocket. Clara looked at me, her voice softer now. "I don't want you to be the guy who only drives me to dates with other people anymore. I want you to be the one I call when I want to come home. And the one I want to go with when I don't even know where we're going." I didn't make a speech. I didn't promise forever or anything grand. I just looked at her sitting there on the tailgate of the truck that had started everything, and I said the only thing that felt true. "The next time, it's just me." Clara smiled, small and certain. "Next time." And a lot of times after that, of. I used to think my life was just a series of temporary constructions. Build it, use it, walk away before it could fall apart or before I could care too much when it did. Safer that way, cleaner. I told myself that was freedom. But Clara showed me something different. Some places don't hold you down with chains or promises you can't keep. They hold you with something quieter. The simple, steady feeling that when you come back at the end of a long day, someone is waiting. Not because they have to, because they want to. And for the first time in my life, that was enough to make me stay.